Matt, if you are. Okay, not to worry if you aren't, but if you are, then do jump into the intro. So I will get us gently underway. I'm Dan Hopewell. I'm the Director of Knowledge and Innovation at the Bromley by Bow Healthy Living Centre. It's a great pleasure to be with everybody today. And today's webinar is part of a series of work that we're doing over the next 12 months around supporting the greater relationship between health centres, health providers, social prescribing, and social welfare legal advice and financial capability provision in London. As we all know, we're going through some very straitened times in terms of the cost of living crisis. And I think arguably, if you look at the build up to this, really, this has been an ongoing situation for about the last 10 or 12 years, quite frankly. And I think social prescribing link work are very, very much aware of that. Of course, it's become much more acute if one looks at what happened to demand for advice during the COVID 2 years. Of course, that escalated considerably. And whilst a certain section of society became better off actually under COVID and saved considerable amount of money, for the poorest 10, 20, 30%, actually things got a lot worse under COVID, and people exhausted their savings, and many people who are in sort of precarious work were laid off with very, very little protection at all, so that people have got very, very few or indeed none or negative reserves in which to enter this current phase, which is this cost of living crisis. So these are very, very challenging times. And we know that the number of referrals from social prescribing link workers to support for welfare advice, debt advice, fuel arrears advice, fuel poverty advice is increasing. So this is a very, very important webinar. And this whole program that we're delivering over this 12 months includes 6 webinars, training for 100 link workers around welfare advice so they understand it better, and money management and fuel poverty. And also we're training 15 social prescribing link workers in London to become specialist welfare benefits advice link workers, so that they can carry out a new specialist role in London, where they can give some social welfare advice within the context of their social prescribing scheme without necessarily the need to onwardly refer clients to that. So, and we've still got a couple of places left on that program. If anybody's interested, do get in touch with us. We're starting that course next week, and again we'll have a refresher start in September, so you're still in time if you're interested in that course as well. It's a 12-month training program, but if anybody's interested in that. And to say that this whole program has been commissioned and sponsored by the Mayor of London and Healthy London Partnership as well. So Bromley by Bow is absolutely delighted to be working in conjunction with Mayor of London, GLA, and Healthy London Partnership on this program, which is so important for Londoners at the moment. So we've got a Jamboard open, and in the chat there is the link to the Jamboard. So one of the intentions of this 12-month project is to support link workers also sharing their skills and knowledge with each other. So if you've got any tips or hints about how to support your clients, or how you are supporting your clients around issues of fuel poverty, fuel debt, fuel arrears, and money management, please pop them in the Jamboard. And Wilma's going to be monitoring that through the session, and we'll have a look at that quickly towards the end of the session. But we will also collate all of those hints and tips, and we will email them back out to you after today's session, along with a recording of today's session and some resources as well. So without more ado, it's a great pleasure to introduce Matt Copeland from the NEA. I'm going to put up some slides in a second. So the NEA does really, really special work around fuel poverty and fuel challenges around cost of living, but also around policy, around energy, energy efficiency, climate change as well. So it's absolutely fantastic to have you with us, Matt. I'm not going to introduce all the speakers at the beginning, but you can all introduce yourselves as you present. So Matt, I'm going to hand over to you, and maybe you'd like to say hello, and then I'm going to pop the slides up so that everyone can get to see your presentation.
Thanks, Dan, and hi everyone. I'm Matt. I'm from NEA, as Dan said, National Fuel Poverty Charity. I'm the head of policy and public affairs there, which means I work on our advocacy function, trying to lobby governments and regulators to take further and better action on fuel poverty. And today I'm going to be mainly giving a background on the energy crisis and how it's impacting on fuel poor households and what the UK government has sort of done to date on that. Are the slides okay to start then?
Yeah, just hang on one second and I'll get the slides up.
So it's fair to say that the energy crisis has been dominating our work over the past year, and that really has manifested itself through higher prices that have been passed through to households. And this started about just over a year ago, when in April 2021, the government put up Ofgem put up the price cap by about £100 for the average household. What happened subsequently to that?
With the slides and yeah.
Sorry. Well, we're sorry to interrupt. Matthew, is there any way your voice is crackling quite a lot? I don't know if there's any way you could improve your mic a little bit. I don't know if Dan, did you hear the same, or can you hear
I can hear it quite well here.
Okay. If there's any other issues, just please put it in the chat. Sorry, Matthew, to interrupt. And also, will the slides be shared? Sorry.
Yeah. Can you see the slides now?
Yeah.
If you can go on to the next slide, then yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
So last year we saw a £100 increase in April and a further £150 in October. And to be honest, we thought that was pretty disastrous at the time, and we were writing letters to the Chancellor to take action at that point. And then what was unthinkable happened, and prices went up by a further £700 in April this year. And those increases were almost entirely due to changes in the wholesale market. So the cost of basically buying gas from Russia and other places. And as you can imagine, largely driven by what's happening in Ukraine. It's important to note that as part of this increase, prepayment households, so households that have to pay in advance for their energy and top up using coins and vouchers, pay more for their energy under the price cap than other users, so about £50 more than direct debit payment users. And another important thing to consider is standing charges. So particularly for those households who use prepayment meters, standing charges are really important, because when their meter goes to zero and they don't have access to energy anymore, standing charges accrue as debt on the meter, and that debt has to be cleared before energy can be accessed again. So a big standing charge means that when they do go off supply, bigger debts are incurred and more money has to be spent just to get back on supply. So really worrying that, one, the average price in total has gone up, but two, the standing charge increased so significantly as well. If we go on to the next slide, that's in the context of loads of other things happening at the same time. So millions of households generally in arrears, huge number for inflation, a 40-year high, and sort of set to get higher as well. Universal credit homing cut last year by £20 a year, a week, sorry. Lots of low-income households taking on new borrowing, petrol costs increasing, tax rates increasing, rents increasing, property prices increasing. So this is in total a cost of living crisis. I would say that the biggest element of this remains energy, and the energy crisis is going to get worse. So Ofgem said about a month ago that they expect the energy price cap to rise by an additional £800 in October. And analysts looking at this now predict that figure will be closer to £3,000. So a £1,000 increase coming down the line. And we wouldn't be surprised if it went higher than that. So really, really worrying times and things getting worse as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? This obviously has an impact on fuel poor households. So in England, fuel poor households are sort of measured through the lens of living on low income and living in an energy efficient home. So not having much money coming in and living in a home that's hard to heat, that costs a lot to heat. And it's worth noting that those prices that I was talking about earlier, so £2,000 for the average bill for the average household, are not for fuel poor households. So fuel poor households will actually have a higher energy demand. And for those living in an EPC-F property, which is sort of relatively poor energy efficiency, their annual bill would have been over £2,000 the winter just gone, and will be rising by about £1,000 already. And then if you take this October into account, we'll see even further bigger rises for them, and they'll be getting close to or past a £5,000 energy bill, which is horrific. Thinking about the number of fuel poor households, go back one slide, sorry. Number of fuel poor households, that metric of low income and energy efficient home doesn't really respond to prices very well. So NEA has been thinking about this through the lens of households spending 10% of their residual income on energy, which is how we used to measure fuel poverty in the UK or in England, and how Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland still do measure it. And we think that using that metric across the UK, there's about 2 million fuel poor households in addition to what we had before. So really, really significant increase. And apart from the numbers, this has a really big impact on people. And as you all know, being cold at home means exacerbation of existing health conditions, so respiratory conditions getting worse, and musculoskeletal conditions getting worse, those sorts of things, but also new conditions such as mental health problems arising as well. On to the next slide. So the government has sort of reacted to this. So to the left is a bit of a figure showing how the price caps have developed, and to the right is the support that the government's given. And initially, the government in February gave a relatively small package of support, which was a £200 rebate for all electricity users that would have had to be paid back, and a £150 rebate for council tax payers in bands A to D. In May, after months of lobbying from NEA and others, the government came up with a better, bigger package, which can be seen on the right-hand side here. So they changed that £200 loan to a £400 grant for all electricity customers. It's really important that that's universal support, because not everyone in need is in receipt of a benefit. There will be lots of households sort of on the fringes of that, and that £400 will be absolutely vital to them. So we were very much in support of that universal payment. On top of that, deep targeted support was always going to be necessary, and we were really pleased that the government followed through with that. So it's £650 for everyone in receipt of a means set of benefits in 2 payments, one in less than a month now and another in the autumn. £300 top up for everyone, all households, receiving the winter fuel allowance. So that's £300 top up, regardless of how much they get in the winter fuel allowance anyway, to be paid at the same time. They'd usually get it. £150 payments for all recipients of disability benefits, be paid later in the year. The council tax rebate that we've already spoken about, and also worth noting that the warm home discount has been extended now legally, meaning that about just under 3 million households will get a £150 rebate on their energy bills this winter, and that will go to households in receipt of means tested benefits who have high energy use as judged by the government. So a pretty good package of support. It's worth considering those households who won't benefit from this. So that universal support is pretty universal, but not completely universal. There's a couple of types of household that might not benefit. So one is renters who don't pay their own energy bills. So when they have a service agreement with their landlord, they might not be able to receive that. The landlord might get it instead and might not pass it through. But also prepayment customers in previous schemes haven't actually cash their vouchers. So they'll get it in 6 equal voucher amounts, and you would, from previous schemes, we expect about 30% of vouchers to go unclaimed. So quite a big risk there. Obviously, lots of households on the fringes of fuel poverty who are not in receipt of a means tested benefits. We think it's at least a third of fuel poor households don't receive a means tested benefit. If we go on to the next slide now, I just wanted to talk about the sort of business as usual schemes that have progressed as well, which is really important to this whole thing. So alongside all of that cost of living payments that I've just spoken about, the 2 big schemes to address fuel poverty have been extended recently, and those are the warm home discount and energy company obligation. And the energy company obligation is an insulation scheme to help fuel poor homes make their homes less leaky, basically help them to maintain heat a bit better. And that's going to be extended by 4 years to 2026, with the overall spend profile increased quite significantly. And those eligible are people in receipt of means tested benefits who have an energy inefficient home. Importantly, local authorities and suppliers can qualify vulnerable households through their own data, but also medical professionals essentially can also refer households into the scheme much more easily than before. We're awaiting the guidance on that, but that's something to watch out for in the context of sort of what we're talking about today. And that takes a slightly different approach to before. So this is aiming to upgrade fewer homes, but to a much greater extent through multiple measures. So making fewer homes much more energy efficient. The warm home discount, again, extended to 2026, 150 quid going to just under 3 million households. Goes to households in receipt of a means tested benefit with high energy costs, and funding for industry initiative remains. And industry initiative is just energy advice, basically, and debt advice. So that's really, really important to the fuel poverty sector. And it's absolutely brilliant that scheme's been extended. Legally, those warm home discounts regulations have now been approved and they're in force, but we're still awaiting the legislation for eco to be approved. So that scheme's not quite live yet. I think that's all from me, and I think I'm broadly on time. So hopefully that's all good.
Great, thank you, Matt. And you've got us off to a fantastic start with this webinar, with a real overview of the situation, what's happened, what's about to happen in the autumn, how that will affect households, and an overview of what support is available. We're now going to come on to John Garbett, who's the Principal Policy Officer for Energy for the GLA. Although, and John, thank you so much for being with us as well. I'm going to move on now to your presentation. And it'd be great to hear from you about what the Mayor of London and the GLA are doing around fuel poverty in London. And also, I know you've got some information about what's happening with some of the local authorities, some of the councils in London as well. So it'd be great to hear about that. Thank you so much, John, for being part of today's webinar.
Thank you for the invite, and it's great to see you all. And hopefully I'll be able to provide you with a little bit of good news about energy, the energy fuel crisis. If you can move on to the next slide, please, and the next one. I'm going to talk about our Warmer Homes programme, which is a government grants funded scheme to support people on low incomes to support people, help them keep their homes warmer. So if you can move on to the next slide. It's going to be a quick rattle. So to explain a little bit about the programme, the funding, what happens with the programme in terms of what types of things can be installed to make a home warmer, who's eligible, and what happens in the process. So give you an overview, really, of the whole scheme, how it works from beginning to end, why it's there, why it's important. Next slide, please. Our key objective really is to help people on low incomes to make their homes a little bit warmer. And therefore, the idea then is, if their homes are properly insulated and all the right measures have been put in place to make them energy efficient, they won't be spending quite so much money on fuel and energy, electricity and gas. So those are really, that's the reason why the scheme is available, and why it's there. And it's available to anyone on low incomes. We'll come to that one in a minute or two. So what it does is really it's improving the quality of housing that people live in. So Matt mentioned properties in band F. The government's objective actually is to get just about every property up to band C rated, energy proficient, energy performance certificated band C by 2035. And that's both the private sector and the public rented sector. So it's quite a challenge to make that happen. And these grants are really designed to help people who EPC rating is from band D upwards to G, which is the worst type of banding. Grants available are between £5,000 and £20,000, and depends upon certain factors. And it's available. We have £40 million worth available, and that will help us improve 3,200 homes in London, across London. Okay, so next slide, please. So anyone can apply who is a homeowner, a tenant, and by homeowner, it could be a homeowner straight landlord, private landlord. They must have a disposable income after housing costs of at least £20,000 a year or less. And they could also be living in a park home. So that's the broad base spectrum, and they have to live in London, within a London borough. Next slide, please. So if they have an income of £20,000 a year or less, and that disposable income comes after their mortgage payments, rent, or council tax. So all their housing costs are taken into account and into consideration. If they're on benefits, again, they can qualify. So again, it's for people on low incomes or on benefits. And if they have certain health conditions, again, then they could qualify as well, but they would need to be on a low income and meet all the other criteria. And there's a link for anyone to apply, which I'm assuming that the slides will be distributed out to everyone. So you have to click on the link. Next slide, please. And if you're a tenant, it's exactly the same criteria as well. So, and the only difference is we do have some funding available for social housing. So if someone's living in social housing, then there is some money available for that. If the homeowner is a landlord and their property is let, then they'll be expected to make a contribution towards the works to help pay for the costs. It basically means that contribution is basically spread out, so it enables us to be able to reach more homes and provide more works into homes. And we think that's a useful thing, because bear in mind, we're actually improving the value of their property as well. So by improving their home internally, and then it means that their property values could increase. Next slide, please. So benefits which are eligible, those are the key ones, and those are the ones where people who are receiving any of those, then they can definitely apply, and they should be eligible for the scheme. So that's quite a useful piece of information, I think, for you as well. And next slide, please. So what do we actually do? We are looking to help people by putting in energy efficiency measures. So looking at things like insulation, wall insulation, both internal and external, loft insulation, could have sort of underfloor heating, putting in electric radiators, energy efficient electric radiators. If there's enough roof space and the building is structurally sound, then solar PV. Heat pumps are a great way to have a green energy source to support energy usage, but they are connected to mains electricity, and they can be expensive to run. So whilst they are an important measure and an important thing that needs to be done to help achieve net zero carbon, because the scheme is designed to help London achieve net zero carbon as well, by taking everyone off gas and provide alternative electric green solutions to their home energy use. Draft proofing is a big one. Again, sort of draft proofing windows, doors, and things like that. That's really important. And double glazing windows. We have an allocation to support a certain number of properties with their double glazing. So if we've got single pane windows, they will definitely be drafty in old Victorian terrace houses and places like that. So those are sorts of things which we can fund under the scheme, and it is a free grant. So that's the most, you've got to understand, it is free money to the tenant and to the homeowner, as long as they qualify. And we have some funding available to help people with gas boiler repairs and replacements if necessary. We do have some properties, we know of some properties which are actually off gas, and again, they can be helped as well. So that's also fine. They just need to meet the eligibility criteria. So it's all about really helping people achieve energy efficiency in their home, provide better sustainable zero carbon buildings which will retain heat and also help homes become a little bit cooler in the hot summers when we have the heat waves. So it really is to help achieve climate change targets, as well as supporting people who are on low incomes and suffering and really struggling with paying their fuel bills. Next slide, please. So what actually happens? So someone who applies, then they're assessed to make sure they are eligible. They'll have to send in supporting information like bank statements and things like that, proof of their income. And so long as their income's total income still falls under £20,000 a year or less after the housing costs, then that's great. Perfect. Then we'll make an appointment with you, or our service provider, Retrofit Works, will make an appointment with you, with the person, the applicant, to assess the home and also to survey the home. So basically the purpose of this is to ensure that the home is initially suitable for any measures, and then secondly to conduct a survey on the property to identify the exact measures which will need to go in that can be funded under the grant. So once those measures have been identified, they're then agreed with the applicant. And if it's a landlord, the landlord needs to work with the tenant, because obviously it's the tenant whose daily life would be disrupted because there'll be people working at his home or her home. And if it's a tenant, the tenant can apply, but they'll have to get the landlord's consent, because obviously it's a landlord's property, and there's a process to make that happen. But anyone who applies, then the process will be fully explained to them. Then a contract of works is agreed and signed by all parties, and the work is scheduled to be carried out. And after it's done, sometime later, we do want to make sure that everything is done to a very high quality standard, and Trustmark is actually one of the highest quality standards for home improvements in the country. So we make sure that every home is Trustmark, all the works are Trustmark approved by an independent assessor. So there's a lot happening within the scheme to make it work. And right now we are looking for people to come and join the scheme, apply for the funding, and improve the quality of their home, and therefore potentially the quality of their life. And that's something which we think is really, really important and really useful, and provides a massive social benefit to our London community. I think that that's the end of the slides. I think maybe two more. Yeah, if you've got any questions, then obviously put them in the chat. And further links to our internal contacts. I just saw one question pop up about social housing and social landlords. The answer to that question is the tenant in social housing should get in touch with their social landlord, definitely.
Thank you, John. That was really fantastic, and obviously really important information for social prescribing link workers in London when you have clients who might be eligible for this scheme, to give them the details or support them to find the details so that they might explore their eligibility and suitability for the scheme. John, I think you mentioned when we had a chat a couple of days ago that this, you might have a little bit of information about what local authorities also are doing themselves. Do you have that to hand? Or?
Yeah, sure. Our role with the GLA is to support local authorities primarily and help them, because the GLA, we can do a broad brush approach and to promote the scheme and let people know it's there and so on. And our approach is basically to try to publicise the scheme as widely and as far as possible, and encourage applications to the scheme. The local authorities individually, what we'd like them to do and what they are doing is submitting their own individual marketing plans to us to let us know what activities they're undertaking and the cost of that, because we can actually provide some funding to local authorities to market the scheme and promote the scheme to their targeted communities. So the local authorities will hold a lot of data about people. They will certainly know people who are on council tax benefits and things like that, and are more likely to want to be able and eligible to apply. So we do support local authorities with that, and many local authorities are trying to encourage applicants as well to the scheme as far as wide as possible within their boroughs. So there would be a link up. It's usually anyone around environment, people involved in environment or climate change agenda within a local authority is more actively involved in trying to coordinate, liaise and facilitate the activities to promote the schemes locally within each borough. So there is another point of call for you to work with your borough representatives where possible as well. Does that help?
Yes, great. Thank you, John. Yes, that's really, really helpful. Yeah, and maybe some of the link workers could put something in the Jamboard if they've got any links or are currently working with their local authority to support clients to access schemes as well. That would be really helpful to hear how that's working on the ground in the different jurisdictions of London's local authorities. Thank you so much, John. That's really, really helpful. We're going to move. Sorry, John, were you going to say something?
My pleasure, and thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And hopefully you can stay on for the rest of the webinar. And now we're going to move on to Mary Ann Foxwell, who is the Director of Citizens Advice Wandsworth, to hear of a really exciting example of how the support for clients is happening on a local authority scale, and some really, really great work happening in Wandsworth, which we're now going to hear about. And this starts to sort of take this down to a borough level, if you like, and a borough level approach to supporting clients around obviously such things as welfare advice as well, but particularly today, of course, we're featuring on the challenges of fuel poverty and fuel arrears. So Mary Ann, thank you so much for coming on today's webinar. It's absolutely fantastic to have you with us today. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan, for that great introduction, and thank you for having me. As Dan says, I'm Chief Executive of Citizens Advice Wandsworth, and just to be clear with everybody, each local Citizens Advice is a completely independent charity. So we all do things differently. I'm going to talk to you today about what we're seeing and what we're doing in Wandsworth. So next slide, please, Dan. So this graph, as it says at the top, shows you our tracking of the hardship that's experienced by our clients. We always collect data, but the graph shows you pre-pandemic, taking you through a pretty consistently flat rate, as you can see, and then it rises during the pandemic period. And then obviously we expected it to dip again, but it hasn't. You can see it started to begin to dip and up it goes again. We measure hardship by using a proxy proxy measures of issues clients are bringing to us. So in this case, it includes food bank vouchers, charity applications, and discretionary hardship applications. You can see that we're seeing about 280 clients a month, or 70 a week. Those people are coming to us basically destitute. And one other thing to point out is this graph isn't a true reflection of need. What it is a reflection of our capacity. So we know that the need out in our community is much higher than this graph actually shows. And as we've already heard today, clients have got rising bills at the moment, which Matthew talked about, which they just can't afford. And as Dan said, these bills are coming on top of years of austerity. And the fact that the pandemic really took out the safety net of so many people. And it's those things combined that have led to this unprecedented hardship that we're seeing now. And the next slide shows you the hardship in a different way. It's not a data hardship, it's the hardship from the stories of our clients. And literally at the beginning of the week, when I got this presentation ready, I dipped into our referral inbox and I was overwhelmed by the requests for help that were in there. And I'm the chief exec, so I don't bump into these so much as my advisors, and I guess you guys who see this day in, day out. So we're literally inundated, and I'll talk a bit later about the advice we give to residents who get referred or self-referred with problems of destitution like this. But I wanted first to outline our approach. Next slide, please. So at Citizens Advice Wandsworth, we've got a really particular approach to partnership work, and this informs all our relationships, including our relationships with our link workers. Our approach was really prompted by the organisational realisation, well, I don't know, 5-6 years ago now, that we can't ever meet the demand for our services, and that people in need of advice don't necessarily come to advice centres. That was a bit of a moment of epiphany for us all. Instead, people often turn to their neighbours, people in the community they trust, maybe their priests, their imams, their teachers, their GPs, and of course their link workers. So this realisation led to us putting equal emphasis on collaboration, capacity building, and preventative work. And our preventative work, going back to the last speaker, includes actually local advocacy. And for us, that's particularly in relation to our local authority. So we share our data with our local authority, we talk to them about the experience of our clients, and we really influence particularly how they spend their hardship funds. And over the last few years, there's been a lot of central government money coming to local authorities, and local authorities have the discretion on how they spend it. And we've really said to them, look, you need to spend it differently. You need to be more flexible. You need to be more responsive, and you need to really think about who isn't getting the hardship funds at the moment. So for instance, during COVID, they agreed to make hardship payments to people with no recourse to public funds, which was kind of unprecedented. So we really, that advocacy work's really important to us. Next slide, please. So knowing we can't ever meet demand for our help, and that people in need of our help won't necessarily come to us, we decided to focus on building the capacity of our community. And advice first aid training is the main way in which we share our advice knowledge with our partners. And at the same time, when we're delivering advice first aid, we also build trust in our services. And the map on the right is a slightly outdated map, but it shows the range of agencies and groups and faith groups and community groups across the borough that we've trained in advice first aid. And through this training, we help our partners to spot advice issues, to provide initial help and signposting. And that signposting could be to local sources of help, but it could also be to national sources of help. There are lots of really amazing national sources like National Debtline out there that lots of our community members have never heard of. And importantly, we also help our partners know how and when to refer to us. But all of that has been really, really beneficial in our work with our link workers. They're really clear when to refer to us and what we do and what they can do themselves. And this picture at the bottom shows a cohort of trainees from a range of statutory, community and voluntary and faith organisations. And another benefit of advice first aid is this linking of groups and people with each other, but also with us. So we've grown a network. And the next slide shows how we really further facilitate the collaboration of this network. And we do this by hosting an online referral platform called ReferNet. ReferNet allows partners to refer not just to us, but to each other. And this slide shows not all, but most of our ReferNet partners. There are about 40 in total. And the partners provide a really wide range of services. It's not just advice services, it's emotional support, it's practical support. And the other thing that we do is we hold biannual meetings, and being on ReferNet includes the expectation that you will participate in these meetings. So it's about relationships, not just transactions. So these partners know what each other do. They have an understanding of each other's services. And so in that way, they trust each other, and that makes those referrals much better. So in this way, Advice First Aid and ReferNet, we've created this network which we hope and we think prevents residents from falling between the cracks in services. I checked the database earlier, and in the Q4, so January to March 2022, there were 550 referrals between ReferNet partners in our borough, which I think is a pretty impressive number. You can see Enable and Surrey Physio on this slide, and they're our link workers, and they're a real key part of this local network. I'm going to talk really briefly now about the relationship that we have with them. Next slide, please. So we're really lucky that our CCG have funded our advice service since I think 2013. And that link between health and social inequality is really understood by a few key GPs in our borough. However, before social prescribing came into being, referrals were patchy because they really depended on the GP's personal knowledge and their understanding of the social determinants of health. Some practices really referred in vast numbers, some practices not at all. And so having link workers across the borough has really, really improved the consistency of the referrals. They pretty much come from all the practices in our borough now. And obviously Advice First Aid has also increased the quality of the referrals. You can see from this slide, as we've talked about earlier, the increase in referrals from link workers. Year on year, it's increased, and what we're in discussions with the CCG to increase our funding in line with the increase in referrals from link workers. So far, they've been pretty responsive. We're not sure about beyond next year yet. If the slide showed you pre-link workers referrals, they would be significantly lower. So for us, it's been a great relationship and the link work has been a great new addition to the borough. So then in the next slide, I'm just going to show an example of a recent referral. And it's a typical case that I guess most of you are familiar with. Just a family, a couple really struggling without enough income to survive on. And the slide outlines the support we typically provide to clients experiencing hardship. Actually, on the top bullet should be food bank referral. And we're key with the main issue of food bank vouchers in the borough. But then underneath that, we always complete local authority crisis applications because we think, cash is best. So we refer to the food bank, we'll also try and get cash for the clients. And our law centre provides debt advice. They've got the debt advice contract, not us, and we've got a great relationship with them. So we refer to them on ReferNet. They provide debt advice. They also provide financial capability help and support. And RAP, which is our local provider of fuel vouchers, and they will provide the energy support that John was talking about just now. We also signposted to Water Help, which is a scheme that gives people on a low income a 50% reduction on their water bill. Transport for London bus and tram discounts. We told the client she could get council tax reduction, and we would have checked that she was able to apply for that herself, and if not, we would have supported her. We liaised on her behalf with the council about the rent arrears. And then, of course, a big bit of our work is helping people apply for benefits. And we would have applied, I think we helped them both apply for PIP and attendance allowance. And obviously that will significantly increase their income to a more sustainable level if the claims are successful. So the next slide just shows you, I've given you our view of our relationship with our link workers. This is a link worker's view, and Ruth is telling us about the change that she's seeing in terms of referrals to her, but also about her fears for the coming months, which I think is something we're all really fearful of. And I know the link workers just love having us there to refer to it. And what's really important is that we do get this feedback from link workers, and that feedback is good and bad, and we've got a responsive relationship then. It's a key relationship. We speak to each other, and that makes the partnership so much stronger. And my next slide is my final slide, which is to let you know that that we've been built, our partnership approach across Wandsworth has proved very successful. I'm incredibly proud of it, and I talk about it a lot. And I'm really delighted to say that we're hoping to extend that more broadly across London. And although I started by saying that local citizens advice are all independent charities, actually we're starting to change how we work together, because we know that Londoners will benefit from us collaborating. It's not easy because we're all difficult. It's been a long slog getting to the point now, but we are in the early stages of this partnership, which has the ambition of being able to offer an access route to partners like yourselves wherever you're based in the city. So there's funding about to be announced that isn't going to provide a single point of access, but it's going to build the capacity of centres across the city to respond to the cost of living crisis. But I really hope to be able to come back within the next year or so to say, hey, link workers, here's one front door. You can all access our citizens advice services wherever you are in the city. So that's it from me.
Mary Ann, thank you so much for that incredible presentation. The model that you have developed in Wandsworth is absolutely outstanding. Both the network that you have created there, and I think I went to one of those get-togethers of the 40 partners as well, I remember, prior to COVID. So it's more than, as you say, a referral platform. It's a partnership, it's relationship building, it's people understanding each other. It's not by a single direction, it's sort of multi-directional, and it's about how you reach people who, as you say, who would not normally necessarily even know they had a problem that had an advice solution. So your advice first aid training is also obviously a critical part of that. I think there's real room for us to learn from Wandsworth across London, and I really look forward to picking up with you after today's webinar to discuss actually that model and how it might be supported to grow across London. Obviously pan-London as you've described, but also probably borough by borough, because of course that's the geography that makes sense for everybody. So fantastic, thank you so much for giving us this really exciting example from London. And as I say, we'd be really keen to see how we might learn from it and support translation actually in London. So thank you. And I hope that gives link workers an understanding of potentially how they might get involved in helping to build that in their own boroughs as well. So thank you so much. And we obviously look forward to hearing about this single portal for London for citizens advice as well in the coming months. Thank you. We're now going to sort of go down a scale, if you like, from borough level to primary care network level. And we're going to talk about what happens at a primary care network level. And oh dear, what's gone on with the slides? Bear with me, we'll zoom through these. And we're going to come to the Bromley by Bow, or maybe we've got to the end of one slide deck, if we have, excuse me, while I swap slide decks. And we're going to move to another slide deck now. As I stitched these all together last night, I realized that everybody's got different templates. And when you put them all together as one single slide deck, you end up with everybody's template messing around with the typefaces and colors of everybody else's templates. So just bear with me while I swap over the slide decks, and we move on now swiftly to Bromley by Bow Centre, who are going to talk about this work at a primary care network level. And we should have some slides coming up now, I hope, and you should be able to see a full slide there. Great. Is that up for everybody? Somebody could give me a thumbs up.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Mark,
Seamless, Dan. Absolutely seamless.
fantastic. Thank you, Leanne. Right, Mark, we're going to hand over to you, and I think Alia and possibly Layla as well. You might be a triple act even. We're going to talk about sort of how this works at the primary care network level. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. So, hello, everyone. I'm going to start Bromley Bio Centre's presentation today. So I'm Mark Schuder. I oversee the financial inclusion projects at the Bromley Bio Centre. So what I'm going to do is start by mentioning some of the energy projects that we have at the centre currently being delivered. Dan, do you want to move on to the next slide?
Yes,
and so we'll be talking about how the energy projects work with the social prescribing teams to support the clients. So our main project at the centre is called Eastern Energy Fit. It's been around for about 10 years, I believe, and being delivered out to the Bromley Bio Centre. It's a pan-London project supporting people around energy issues. And what this means is anyone with debt, energy debt, things like negotiating payment plans, looking at grants, financial assistance that's available. Our advisors are really experienced in supporting people around these issues. They do work on a one-to-one basis, and so it's personalised support for that person, for that client. There's many other things that they do. They also supply, make applications for white goods. And recently we had a bit of funding to provide fuel vouchers. And so that was a big thing over Christmas. And just recently we just ended that pot of funding. But that was really essential. And it came at a really, really important time as well to support people around, the energy costs. Project that we have at the moment, and this is the one that I'm overseeing, it's called Empower You To. Again, it's an energy project. It's done slightly differently in that it trains up community members to become energy champions. There's 3 different elements. So the first key element is training up the champions in the community. We worked in Tower Hamlets, Hackney and Newham to do this, and we had partner organisations with Age UK East London and Citizens Advice East End. We trained up 60 energy champions in the community, and that was over COVID as well. So a lot of our energy champions were trained online. And the idea is that they go out into the community, supporting friends, family, neighbours on energy related matters. It is low level. And what they did was they trained, they actually completed a 6-week accredited course supplied by OCN, and the idea is that support or tackling fuel poverty comes from within the community, and I guess the idea is to kind of free up some of the advisor work as well for general stuff, more simpler stuff like applying for warm home discount, and this is what we do. We show people how to do that, and then they can go and pass on the information to friends, family and neighbours. We also did we do one-to-one support as well, and I guess it's a slightly different to the actual work of the generalist advisors around energy, because what we do is we kind of look at the heart of why people are struggling financially and what's causing them to kind of fall into debt or not be able to pay their bills. So it's a long conversation, and it's an ongoing conversation to support people. And we also do workshops as well around the community. So within organisations, we go into ready-made groups and we kind of deliver energy saving tips, and we look at things like how to read bills, meters and things like that. So it's a really, really interesting and really fruitful project as well that we've been delivering. And again, Layla's going to be talking about it as well, but it is that whole idea of working, having all of this in one place so that we can, it's a seamless transition for our clients as well between social prescribing and the energy advice departments. I'm going to hand over to Layla now, who'll talk a bit more about the social prescribing team and their work. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Hi everyone, hope everyone's well. I'm gonna talk really just briefly about the Bromley by Bow social prescribing service, because I do want to leave more time for my colleague Alia, who's actually going to be talking to you guys a bit about her role in social prescribing and as an energy advisor. But just very briefly, the Bromley by Bow social prescribing service serves primary care network 6. So that's the sort of Mile End East, Bromley by Bow area in East London. We have around 60,000 patients across 6 practices. And in the team, we have around 5 link workers, 2 mental health community connectors. And within that team, we have a couple of specialist roles that I'll talk to you guys a bit about as we move on. Like most social prescribing schemes, our primary care needs are focused around sort of mental health issues, loneliness, social isolation, unemployment, social welfare, including housing, benefits advice, debt, energy. Again, like most schemes during the pandemic, we saw a huge rise in the increase of referrals into the service. And now what we're dealing with is post-pandemic, seeing an even more significant rise in sort of patient needs in the network, specifically around the area of social welfare and energy. It's no surprise just, listening to our previous speakers talking about the topic. As a network, though, we've had to really sit back and think about how we address this sort of pandemic in itself. And we've had to do that in a number of ways. And I'll just give you a few examples of what we've done with our network to support patients in the area, particularly around sort of social welfare and energy. So one way is through shaping our patient pathway through primary care. What we have is a direct referral route for primary care sort of practice staff and clinicians in order to directly refer patients to our Bromley by Bow social welfare services. That way, it's a lot more of a seamless transition, as Mark was sort of mentioning previously. What we're trying to do is reduce the number of people that patients are being connected to. So rather than going through the social prescribing route and then being connected to an energy advisor, for example, or a social welfare advisor, we're giving practices the opportunity to directly refer onto social welfare services through our service. So that's one way that we've done that. Another way is by creating specialist roles. What we did realise was that by far, most of our referrals coming into our service were around social welfare needs, around housing, homelessness, energy, debt. So we had the opportunity to kind of sit and think about the team structure, and we decided to kind of create a specialist social prescribing role. We already had a fantastic advisor in our social welfare team that had been a qualified advisor for some time, and what we did was train her up as a social prescribing link worker so that she could do both of those roles. And that's been, we've been doing that for the last year, and we've seen a real benefit to that actually. She provides support to the primary care network by supporting clinicians with housing letters. She also she goes to sort of practice meetings, clinical meetings, and updates practice staff on the landscape of social welfare needs to kind of better inform our primary care network. In addition to that, we offer sort of drop-in services in our practices on housing issues. We're starting to set up coffee mornings where we are going to be providing energy advice to patients. And we also have Alia, who we're going to be hearing from in a moment about her role, which is a really, really exciting role actually, because Alia has been one of our longest standing social prescribers in the team. She's been working as a social prescriber for, I think, over 5 years, Alia, isn't it? I think a bit more than that. So a really seasoned link worker. Alia had an opportunity, I think a year or so ago, to train as an energy advisor. And so she's been combining those two roles. And it's been really wonderful to actually see the integration in social prescribing, providing holistic support within the framework of also being able to offer our patients that are in need sort of energy advice. So I want to stop talking because I really want you to hear more from how Alia's work is going and how that integration is working and the impact that is having on the people that we support in our network. So Alia, I'll let you speak.
Hi everyone, I hope you can hear me well. My mic is a little bit dodgy today, so if you can't hear me, do let me know. Yeah, thank you for having this really important training session webinar. It's a matter that it's an issue that we really need to address and talk about more. Like Layla said, I'm a social prescribing link worker, but I'm also a energy advisor, and I sit within the East and Energy Fit advice team, which Mark pointed out earlier on. Now, my role, the uniqueness of my role enables me to work in a way to support clients on different matters, and one of them being fuel poverty, which is currently something that we're seeing a lot of. So it's a growing need that we have been seeing since last year, and no doubt it's going to get worse over the coming months. Now, we see a lot of people in destitute, and what my role enables me to do is when I'm seeing them in the social prescribing session, my training and advice enables me to have a holistic conversation with them, whereby I'm able to ask them questions around their financial concerns. So often we will get clients who have been referred for depression, for loneliness, for challenging, home challenges, or it might simply just say financial crisis. It doesn't outline what that financial crisis is. Now, in the social prescribing session, I'm able to have that conversation and really dig deeper into what those issues are. Now, often a client will present with needs around mental health, social isolation, or it might sometimes be rent arrears, marriage breakdown. But as you dig in deeper, you find out that the financial crisis has often led to the increase in living costs, the increase in fuel costs, where they're unable to afford to heat their home. They're having to make a really tough choice between food and fuel. And what my role enables me to do is actually ask them important questions like, what benefits are they on? So what I then do is do a financials capabilities assessment and look at what benefits they're on, what their outgoings are. If they're on low income, have they applied for warm home discount? Have they applied for Water Shore Plus? Are they on the priority services register? Now, often people will say, I haven't been able to afford my fuel bill. That then leads on to the conversation around, are you in debt? Now, if they're in debt, then the conversation then is extended into, have you contacted your supplier? Have you made any payment arrangement? So my role then enables me to work with them in the social prescribing session to do the basic things around warm home discount, priority services register, Water Shore, as well as water help. Now, if they then present with more complex needs around debt, fuel debt, where they're not able to afford to make payments, I will then see them as a fuel advisor. So they're seeing the same advisor in a different session to support them around fuel debt. So what I will then do is try and set up a payment arrangement for them. Often it means applying for British Gas energy support funds to see if the debt can be reduced. So as an energy advisor, what that enables me, having that knowledge about what support is available, I'm then able to pass that down to the client and say to them, have you thought about payment arrangement? Have you thought about different ways of seeing how you can afford your fuel? So that might be looking at prepayment meters, that might be informing about smart meters, so giving them an element of control. So things are very expensive and they're aware of that. So it's kind of finding ways to kind of give them a bit of control. And of that means having a conversation with them around, if you can't afford your bills every month, every quarterly, have you thought about prepayment meter? Have you thought about having a smart meter? Have you applied for all those discounts? It's also about informing them about the current support package that's been announced by the government, the cost of living, the different support, and informing people if they're aware of that. Also allowing them to kind of understand what they're, what in order to access that, what their entitlement, the criteria is. So that's my kind of role within social prescribing and Eastern Energy Fit. And one of the, I like to give a case study just so people get an understanding of how I may have helped a client. So we had a client who's come into with mental health.
Just to say, if you just a minute on the case study, because we need to.
No, I'm going to make it very brief. Very brief. So, we had a lady that come in with mental health. The cause of that was financial difficulties. The underlying issue of the financial difficulties was fuel debt. So what I was able to do with her was address that fuel debt by setting up a payment plan, applying for a grant, applying for warm home discount, informing her about the current support package that was on offer for her. So that was one way of supporting the client, as well as supporting her with her mental health, looking at, what other support can be put in place. That was looking at things like social activities to reduce the loneliness, the isolation. So it's a role that kind of enables me to work on various different needs of the clients. So do jump in, Layla and Mark, if you feel that there's other things that I need to add. But that's kind of, I'm very aware of the time, Dan. So
I think we need to actually move on to the Green Doctors now. Okay. But thank you all very much, Mok, Alia and Layla for that. And I think what's really important to understand is that within one social prescribing scheme, there are a series of different roles, including a welfare benefits specialist social prescribing link worker and a fuel poverty and fuel debt social prescribing link worker. And as you also mentioned, Layla, 2 mental health social prescribing link workers called community connectors as well. And they are all serving, along with generalist social prescribing link workers, they are all serving one primary care network. And also, I think really interesting, the way you highlighted there, the work of working with general practice and working with GPs so that they better understand what the issues are, so that you're informing the referring parties as well about understanding what these issues are as well. So thank you very much. We've taken it, if you like, from London down to a borough and now down to a primary care network. And now we're going to talk to the Green Doctors, which is an absolutely fantastic project. So I'm delighted to introduce Carolina Castilla-Pena, who's from the Green Doctors, who's going to talk about their work across London's 13 of London's boroughs. Carolina, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, hello, thank you, Dan, and thank you everybody for being here today. Amazing presentations. As Dan said, my name is Carolina. I'm the Senior Outreach Officer for the Green Doctors team at Wandsworth, London. Next slide, please. The Green Doctors team, of course, we are very busy as the rest of the people who was presenting today due to the energy crisis, but we've been working in London for 16 years. And the Green Doctors are a team of energy advisors. Some of our energy advisors has been with us for 7-8 years now. The idea is to help the most vulnerable residents to stay warm, to save money, and to improve the energy efficiency in the house. And we've been working with London boroughs, with housing associations, and in some of the boroughs that we cover that I will mention in the minute, we've been working as well amazingly with the social prescribing link workers that I think they are doing an amazing job on how they approach and how they speak with the clients. Next slide, please. We at the moment we cover 13 of the London boroughs. So we cover. I know this will be shared with you. So we cover Brent, Barnet, Ealing, Hammersmith and Fulham, Harrow, Hillingdon, Hounslow, Kensington and Chelsea, Lambeth, Lewisham, Newham, Thaddeus, Westminster, and in Camden we only support council tenants. Next slide, please. We like to say that we have a holistic approach in how we help residents with the utility bills. Our aims are, well, first to help residents to improve the negative impacts to living, in a long period of time in a cold home and facing fuel poverty. This will hopefully lead us to help people to maximize the income. As you are very well aware, it's quite difficult at the moment, but of course we always do our very, very best. And the last things that we try to do, and of course because of the energy crisis, a very important point at the moment, is to enable residents to take action in how they use energy at home, to spend less money and as well to help the environment. Next slide, please. I'm quite conscious of the time, so I'm trying to put everything together in a couple of minutes. There was some mention during the presentation about the health implications, and again, I'll let you to read. You are very well of that, but I think one of the things that Matt mentioned at the beginning is a lot of negative impact with the mental health of the residents, stress, isolation, and people making a very hard choices, between most in the winter, choose between fuel or food. So of course, this is a very, very important, and I know the social prescribing workers are very well of that. Next slide, please. In terms of our service, at the moment, we are providing a hybrid model of telephone consultation or home visits. This is as well a one-to-one support. So we tailor the sessions to the residents. We give personal advice on the energy bills, for example, helping to understand incorrected bills, checking that they are sending the meter readers, all this kind of thing to let them understand what kind of tariff they are paying. We share energy tips on how people can save energy in the daily basis, how to use the washing machine, how to use the kettle, all these kind of things. We help as well to navigate what discounts are available, that as well was mentioned during the session, warm home discounts, water discounts, and of course we help them to apply for these discounts, as well as priority service residents. That is very important for vulnerable residents. So the energy suppliers, they know that there is a vulnerable resident in that property. We help as well, and was mentioned during the sessions, to understand the benefits of smart meters at the moment, and why having a smart meter that of course is free can help them to be on top of the energy bill and to understand where the consumptions go in the house. Next slide, please. Very important, we help people to manage fuel debt. So debt that they have with gas, electricity, and water. This could be, different ways. Could be, for example, the possibility to help them to apply for a grant who writes off the debt, or will be calling the energy supplier on their behalf. And of course, because like I mentioned at the beginning, some of our energy advisors, they have a lot of experience. We cannot say it's always a positive outcome, but we have quite a lot of very good outcome in that matters. We help residents as well who like to do home improvements in the house, to apply as well for this kind of a scheme, or to tell them what is in the market at the moment. For example, if they like to change the boiler or do insulation, these kind of things. We help residents as well to apply for white goods, and of course there is eligibility criteria for that. And the important thing that we deliver small energy saving items to the residents. It could be, draft proof, LED bulbs, radiator panels. If we do the home visit, we install the measures for them. If not, we will send it by post. But I always say it sounds like a negative message in the middle of the summer, but spring and summer are the best seasons where we can help residents to think in advance of the winter and autumn to be ready. And we signpost people to other organizations, could be Citizen Advice Bureau, food banks. In some of the cases, we know that when the referral comes to us through the social prescribing link workers, they usually take care of other things, but in some cases that is not, we can signpost them to other organizations. Next slide, please. This is the eligibility criteria as well. I will leave you to read it with time when you receive the slide, but basically everybody who is fuel poor and low income can access to our service. Next slide, please. To refer a resident is very easy. The best way, if you are referring a resident, is to use our online form. It's take less than 2 minutes, and it's GDPR compliant. We have as well a free telephone number because we accept self-referrals, so residents can contact us directly. So they can call if they don't have any money or any credit, they can call for free. We have a dedicated email in the case that you refer somebody and you'd like to do a follow-up or check something. If something were wrong, you can email there, and of course our website. Next slide, please. In a nutshell, all the once the referrals, when we receive the referrals, we call the residents to book in advance the call or the visit. Will take around 1 hour the call and a little bit longer the home visit because of the installation of the measures. Everything is completely free, and we don't check income or none of these things. I mean, unless we need to apply for a grant. But of course, the Green Doctor, to assess the situation, they need to ask particular questions about the property and the people who live in the house to be able to give the best information and maybe the best discounts that people can apply if necessary. And I mentioned again that we drop off or we install the energy measures after the consultation. Next slide. Just to finalize, I mean, of course, we've been talking for almost an hour and a half about the increases of the prices. Nothing we can do about that. So a couple of tips to share with the social prescribing or what they can talk about with the residents about that. Of course, we are happy to receive as many referrals as you can refer, but it's important that people know how to take control and avoid debt. So one of the things is improve the energy efficiency in the home. There are small things that we can do, and there are, of course, large improvements. If it's necessary, we can give advice on that. Check that the people is claiming all the benefits, and as Matt, as Sean mentioned, there is this money there waiting to be claimed, so help residents with that as well. If people is not able to pay the bills, be sure that they open a conversation with the energy supplier so that they know that they are struggling to pay the bill. And we recommend to residents to keep like a log of the things that they are doing. But again, happy to receive your referrals, and provide monthly meter readers to the energy suppliers. So be sure that people is paying accurate bills and not estimated bill, because it's another source of debt as well. And the last slide, please. We can offer, offer training for your teams. We've been doing a lot with some social prescribing teams in different boroughs. So please feel free to get in touch with me, and we can organize as well activities for residents. We organized with some social prescribing a year ago, I think, in Lewisham with 2 GPs, some online sessions to talk, about energy, how we can save, what discounts are available, and to, in that moment as well, to explain what's going on with the energy crisis, and start talking more on how we can support vulnerable residents. Thank you. I hope I keep the time as more accurate as I can, but thank you. Thanks a lot.
Great, Carolina, thank you so much for that. That was absolutely brilliant, and really, really amazing to hear the work that you're doing, including, of course, that you mentioned that you do home visits as well, which is so critical, because we all know that you learn an awful lot more about somebody's circumstances visiting them and doing a home visit than you will necessarily by seeing them in a consulting room. So
yeah, in some cases it's better support, you know, when people with disability, elderly people, the green doctor can stop if there is damp or mold, or checking as well the bills at the moment. So this is very, yes, it's a very positive, definitely.
Great, thank you so much. And that's rounded off a tremendous series of presentations. Thank you, each and every one of you, for those. We've just got a few minutes now as we move towards the last phase of the webinar. Wilma and Leanna, thank you so much for all your technical support in the background. Just wondered if you've picked up any questions. I'm afraid I haven't had time to concentrate on the chat. If there are any questions or points of view that people are making that you think would be worth reading out. Can I invite you, Wilma and Leanna, to come in now?
So I've can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just keep going. If I think
the volume's a little bit low, Wilma.
Can anyone else go on mute, please? What's going on? Okay, I'll just keep talking. I've asked the guest speakers, I've sent them the questions to answer. We really happy if you could start answering them in the chat. Can you hear me? Also, Carolina, Carolina, there's 2 questions. Would you be able to offer your service to the City of London and to
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm the senior outreach officer. I don't manage the funding, and you know, we depend on the funding that we have at the moment. We don't cover Hackney or the City of London. What I always recommend, Google it, you know, energy advice in Hackney, because sometimes the councils they offer, they have like in-home service, or they are working with a third-party organization. And the same for City of London. Otherwise, the GLA, as John mentioned, I mean, if you go to the GLA website, there is some information there for all the boroughs in London. But again, I would like to say yes one day, but I don't have any say on that.
No, obviously not. Thank you. There's also been a lot of chat discussion going on about fuel vouchers, and especially for some people in Lambeth. If people have any other tips or ideas, please put them in on the Jamboard. That'd be really, really helpful. Also,
I can mention something about fuel vouchers. Of course, it's, you know, as Matt mentioned as well, people in prepayment meter is the people who is hit the most with the increase of the price. So we do not have fuel voucher at the moment. We help residents to know what there is in each of the boroughs. So if you come across a resident who is asking for a fuel voucher, and of course this is just an advice, and there is energy support, like will be, you know, through the social prescribers or green doctors or citizen advice borough or other organizations. My recommendation is to refer them, because the idea is to try to help residents to don't always, you know, try to use fuel voucher, is not to try to see other ways on finding support, you know, will be again, it's in the one-to-one basis. But yes, it's a thing. Some food banks are offering fuel vouchers, but I know as well as information that usually the organization don't put out and about, because there is a lot of people who then call and they don't need it. So, you know, we need to take a little bit of care on that. But if there is any question about any of the boroughs that we cover, please feel free to anybody to get in touch with me, and we can have a chat.
Brilliant, great, thank you. There were quite a few questions for John. John, I don't know if you have a bit of time. John has also started answering in the chat, I think. So Lorraine's question, what if the homeowner does not have a health condition, but other people living with them have a health condition? Can they still apply? And John said, health condition, yes, they can apply. So could you confirm whether that is also if there's people in the household?
Yes, the eligibility criteria would then be based on the total household income. And if the average of the total household income is £20,000 a year or less after housing costs, then they are eligible for funding.
Brilliant.
And or benefit. So that answers that one. I'm just trying to find my other questions. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I wasn't sure if I was supposed to answer these directly in the chat or not. Which is
I've
why.
got a question. Once the application has been approved, how long does it take till work begins?
Yeah, that's right. That is a very good question. It's the dependencies upon that are one, how quickly the homeowner, tenant, and or tenant and landlord agree to the works and sign the documentation to make it happen.
Yeah.
Once that happens, then it will usually take around 2 weeks to plan and organise the works and to get it in place. So around 2 to 3 weeks after.
Brilliant.
After the signing of the contract.
Sounds good. Last question. If people from social housing live in a listed building, they've been told they cannot add certain measures such as double glazing. They obviously have much higher bills. Is there something that can be done about this?
There would be measures that could be done to a listed building. Typically, if it's so long as it's not grade 1. If it's grade 2 listed building, you can usually do things on the inside of the building and not necessarily on the outside. So there could be things like draft proofing instead of double glazing windows. Maybe it's a screen which goes across the windows from the inside, which you pull across. I can't remember what it's called. Draft excluder. And things like that, and installation, obviously. So yes, there are things that can be done, and if you're eligible and you can qualify, then I would suggest that you should apply and see what we can do for you.
Right. Thank you so much. I'm very quick, just because of time, I'm very quickly going to ask Alia, could you answer the question whether you find you find it a challenge to have these merged roles?
Sorry, that I couldn't quite hear you, Wilma. Is the question in the chat box?
The question, Alia, is about kind of people are interested in the idea of a merged role, but there's obviously some challenges around getting the primary care network on board with that. And I think it's a question for the Bromley Bibo Centre broadly. What were some of the challenges, or how did you sell the value of this sort of co role, this very specialist link worker role to the primary care network?
So my role actually, it just happens that I work in both of those roles and they work very well together. So it wasn't, it didn't come about intentionally. So I was working part-time as a social prescriber. The role of the advisor came along and I went for that. But both of those roles work very well together, and there's a lot of added value for those roles to be together. Now, the way I ensure that the boundaries are not blurred is when I've seen client, I make it very clear from the onset what role I'm seeing them with within. So if it's a social prescriber, I do make sure that they understand that I'm seeing them as a social prescriber, but that I will be able to help them on certain issues and topics. Now, if I'm seeing the same client as an advisor, I then make it clear that I'm now seeing them as an advisor, and these are the roles and these are the matters and issues that I will be supporting with. So the client understand what the boundaries are and not to get the boundaries blurred. Obviously, that sometimes doesn't work. So the client does kind of, it just happens when you're in a session, conversations flow organically and other issues come into it, but it's about ensuring that the client's expectations are maintained and that they're realistic. So in each session, before I start the session, I do make sure that I tell them that this is the role, this is the capacity that I'm seeing them in, and if there are other issues that need further investigation, or if they are specifically related to energy debt, this is the role I will be seeing them in. Layla, do you want to come in here and say how that works in terms of the bigger picture?
Just a minute, Layla, because we are just coming up to time now. So it's just coming up to the top of the hour. Oh, we seem to have lost Layla, baby. But I think what's interesting there, Alia, of course, is that you don't have to hand them on from one person to another. That's having seen them as a social prescribing link worker, you can then provide them advice about the multitude of things you've described previously, without them having to form a new relationship with another person. We are literally just coming up to the hour now. I've just saved the chat. We've got the Jamboard as well. We will send that out to everybody who's been on today's session, along with the slides. We're going to stay in touch with you. So say we've got another series of webinars coming up. We've got some more webinars rather coming up and we've got one on supporting social prescribing clients with debt issues towards the end of August. So we will send you all invitations to that as well. I really wanted to thank all the presenters today. You've given a fantastic overview of the situation nationally, the situation in London, looking at some stunning work within one borough, a primary care network, and the fantastic work of Green Doctors as well across multiple boroughs, and your incredibly interesting model and approach to supporting people, and your offer of information and support for link workers as well to get in touch with you. Thank the GLA and the Mayor of London for supporting this programme, and Healthy London Partnership as well. Thank you both, Wilma and Leanna, for jumping in today as our technical support as well, and keeping this whole thing going as well. And for Berenice for setting it all up. Berenice left Bromley by Bow yesterday. She's off climbing mountains now. So thank you all for being on here. We've had about 100 link workers on through the whole session. So probably in aggregate, somewhat more than that. So obviously huge demand for information about models of good practice in London, and more information about what's happening to fuel and fuel poverty and associated issues of cost of living as well from the link worker community. We will keep this work going through the next year, as I say, with more webinars and more support across London. So look forward to being with you all again very, very shortly. And as I say, we will send out the details of the next webinar, which is coming up. And I think we've actually just got those to put on screen now, so that you can see when that is. So it's Friday, the 26th of August. Again, same time, 12:30 till 2. And this is a particular focus on debt, which obviously relates to what we've been talking about today, but it'll look at wider issues of debt as well. And we'll have something on budgeting within that. So really look forward to being with you all again, just after sort of towards the end of the summer. And thank you all for making the time to come on today. And really big thanks to all of our presenters today. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much indeed, everybody.